when we're just trying to push through that, our productivity just seems to get worse and worse and worse. And then we find ourselves making more mistakes and we become more agitated and more frustrated. And it's just, if you're honest with yourself, it's just not doing you any fucking good. All right, here we go, John. It's you and me. We're talking about your new book. Why don't we start by talking about the story behind the book? So what's the title of the book and why in the hell did you write it?
Yeah, so the title is The 3.3 Rule, a new Workday standard, create more by doing less. Um, I actually wrote it, it started as a manifesto, and I don't like using that word, but the other authors that I know say that's what it's called. Because usually manifestos are tied to people who seem out of their mind. But it was basically there's a problem with the accounting industry. Um, a lot of most firms work the accountants to death, knowing that they're going to jump ship. So in their minds, like, hey, we got 3 to 5 years to get as much out of this person as possible. Instead of choosing to change the way they ask their team to work, they just accept that, hey, this is how we've always done it. We're going to keep doing it. Well, the problem is that enrollment in accounting programs across the country are down, yet people leaving the industry is the exact same as it used to be. Um, I This might be audacious of me, but I think our economy in the U.S. is is small business. Like these Fortune 100 companies, they get all the media attention, but 90, what was the stat? I always get it wrong because there was a percentage I used in the book, but it's like 94.7% of net new job creation came from small business, not the Fortune 100 companies. And I believe that if small business doesn't have accountants to support them, we have a problem with our economy. But it started with that. And it's just kind of like, you guys need to do better, stop killing people through like sucking the soul out of them, that type of stuff. And then, it came across other people that are like, well, I'm an attorney and I saw that in my industry, or I'm an engineer, or I'm a computer programmer. So I guess what I discovered over the course of writing the book, which took 2 years, is this is a problem across industries. It's not just an accounting issue. And so we decided to make it a book that relates to all small business because this is a problem in the world. I think you were mentioning how people have this drive. Uh, I think that drive sometimes is coming from an unhealthy place, and we need to give people permission. And sometimes just having awareness over the science and what can be will allow them to stop with this, I don't know, FOMO, fear of missing out, or just this work all the time mindset.
That does fit perfectly with what we were talking about before. We're talking about that hustle culture mentality. And there is that inner drive that a lot of entrepreneurs have. And I was telling you before we started recording that this is a psychological, biological thing. And so much of this tendency to hustle and grind and just extract as much out of people as possible, as well as out of ourselves as business owners, is oftentimes deep rooted in scarcity. And some people might argue with that. They may say, okay, well, I've got $1 million+ business. I've got plenty of money. My yacht payment is made every month. I don't have a problem with scarcity. I would challenge that for a lot of people who find themselves in that mindset of, I can't shut off. I've got to keep pushing. I got to keep grinding. I told you, and I've mentioned it before, so it's not overly vulnerable, but I used to be a major workaholic. Like I told you, to the point where the day after my daughter was born, I was working. That's a problem. I would roll out of bed, I would make my cup of coffee, and I'd be working and sort of kind of half-ass eating some breakfast while I'm working. and only take a break because my husband was nagging at me or one of my kids needed something. And then have, a little bit of family time and then be working basically until I shut down the computer and passed out. That's stupid. It's not healthy. And it was very much stemming from scarcity, and not just financial scarcity, all of the other forms of scarcity that we have a tendency to have. So I would encourage people to start to look at those things, because when you can start to resolve those internal issues, now you're able to retrain yourself to be more present with your family, to be more present with your lunch, uh, to recharge your battery so you are more productive. Now, I know you talk about productivity in your book, so why don't we segue there? And I'd love for you to take a little bit of time and talk about why it is so beneficial to get your foot off of the accelerator and take a break, and how that does actually improve productivity.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. First thing that comes to mind is we have this phrase in the world we use called work-life balance. Uh, the reality is your work can't be separated from your life, and your life can't be separated from your work. Like something happens to you personally, it affects the way you work. I mean, we had a guy had just a crazy team member. Something happened to him, and his the sciatic nerve at the base of his spine like got stuck in between his vertebrae. He couldn't walk for 4 months. Like that affected his work. If things are stressful at work, you come home and now you're stressed with your family. And because it can't be separated, you can't balance one thing. There needs to be two things. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. I think those who struggle with being willing to step away, they're so far on the only focusing on work side, they don't realize how much it has seeped into not letting them do other things in their personal life that maybe they would enjoy doing. You said become more present with your lunch. There's actually a study I talk about in my book that shows that those employees who just took their lunch and didn't work through their lunch, like they just ate, were way more productive than the employees in the same company who worked through their lunch because it gave them an actual break. Um, so let me talk about a really cool study. It was done at the University of Illinois Champaign, and the professor's name was Alejandro Yeres. At the time he was doing this, the idea of attention span, figuring out how long is someone's actual attention span was like really big. And he had a problem with that though, because he's like, I I think everyone's approaching this the wrong way. It's not attention span. We are always focused on something. Like if I'm daydreaming, my attention is on the daydream, not on the work, but my attention is somewhere. So he said, no, I gotta look at this a different way. So then he started looking at studies that showed um, physical stimulus, constant physical stimulus will eventually become neutralized by your brain. So think about the clothes that we're wearing. We put them on in the morning, and because it's a constant stimulus, it doesn't register anymore. But now that we're talking about it, anyone hearing this is going to be like, oh, I can feel the weight of my clothes now a little bit because it's brought back to your awareness. They've shown if you stare at the same image long enough, it'll disappear from your vision. So he said, I wonder if the same thing applies to people's attention span or ability to focus like it does to physical stimulus. So his hypothesis was, does constant stimulus to your attention or focus, does your brain eventually neutralize that as well? And he did a study, he did a 4 group thing, and sure enough, that's what he found. The group that performed the best was the group that had things built in that forced them to like reset what they were doing. Um, and so with that, we also so there's The other study that kind of is the foundation of this is in the UK, they did a study and they showed that the average worker only produces 2 hours and 53 minutes a day, anyways. 2 hours and 53 minutes. They're working 8 hours, but they're only getting 2 hours and 53 minutes of work done.
That's horrifying.
Well, yeah, right? Yeah, as a small
Oh,
business owner, you're like, that seems inefficient. It is. It is very inefficient. So we put that together, and that's where the 3.3 rule comes into play. So the rule itself states the most efficient workday consists of working up to 3 hours at a time, followed by a 30% recovery period. So the reason we did it this way, people might have heard about like the Pomodoro technique or something like that. There's a lot of production techniques and hacks out there that I came across in my studies, but they're very rigid. So if you're in the zone and like working really focused, having a timer go off every 20 minutes is counterproductive. So we wanted to build it in a way so that it totally works with what you have going on. Um, so like if I worked an hour, then I would take 20 minutes off following that hour because that's 20 minutes is 30% of an hour. My good friend Mike McAllowitz, when we were talking about this, he's like, that's interesting because he's like, I naturally only write like 55 to 57 minutes, and then I need a 15-minute break, which is about 30% of 55 minutes. Um, and like for me, an hour and a half block was pretty good writing, but anything more than that, and it just became garbage. I wasn't focused. Now, that being said, you give me a spreadsheet and like, hey, I need you to forecast some numbers. I love that. I could go the full 3 hours, no problem. But it needed to be flexible based on the different tasks that we do. Some are more enjoyable than others, but it also needed to highlight the fact that we have to take a break. And so that is what the 3.3 rule is.
I think this is great. And it's so practical. When people try these different hacks, if they're not practical, they're not sustainable. It feels unnatural. It doesn't feel good. It does feel like an interruption. It just becomes a nuisance, and then we just discard it. We do need to get back to that more intuitive nature. We have a tendency, I think, as human beings, we're always trying to find like this magic solution. Someone must have the magic solution. But what I find is very much relevant to what you just shared. When we sort of trust our own inner guidance, we can feel, okay, this is no longer productive. And I will force myself to just get up, walk away, shake it off, get my head straight before I sit back down. And that break is always, always beneficial because we're no longer creative, we're no longer focused, we're no longer productive. And when we're just trying to push through that, our productivity just seems to get worse and worse and worse. And then we find ourselves making more mistakes and we become more agitated and more frustrated. And it's just, if you're honest with yourself, it's just not doing you any fucking good. Just stop the insanity. So,
Yeah, and I mean, think about all the people who don't have permission in the work environment to even take breaks. So they're sitting there and one, not letting it fully cross their mind that I don't feel like I'm being very productive right now. So instead, it's like, oh, the boss isn't around. Let me pull out my phone and get on Facebook real fast or do some TikTok videos or something. We have found by introducing the rule to companies, like the idea of giving everyone permission to actually take a break, knowing that everyone's on board, that break means no work whatsoever, is really big.
I love that this is going out to business owners. There is still a fair amount of uh, virtual work going on. There's still a fair amount of I mean, it's huge now, right? What do? We outsource, and we don't necessarily have that type of structured control over members of our team. So there's only so much that we can do, with regard to those types of things, aside from just empowering our employees with this type of knowledge and information. But for those individuals who have an in-house team and they have that structure, this is a bit of a mindset shift. And I'm curious if while you were working on this book, or since you've started to drip it out to different people and get some feedback and things like that, have you gotten some pushback? Have you gotten some resistance to introducing this into the work culture?
Yeah, the first one comes to mind is once people start doing the math, I'm actually saying let your team work 6 hours and giving it's basically 6 hours of work and 2 hours of not work. But I'm saying pay them for the full 8 hours. Um, that's one of the first pushbacks, like, well, hold on. And then I just go back and like, look, the study shows these guys aren't even working a full 3 hours every day anyways. The 3.3 rule with given breaks allows you to double what this average is because they could get up to 6 as opposed to 2 hours and 53 minutes. Um, it's interesting when I introduced this first to my team, they almost felt like I was trying to trick them. It's like, you trying to like give us a reason to be fired? Like they didn't believe me. Um, so there was some of the pushback of like, this doesn't, nah, because it's not this is how it is path. Like, I don't know. You really are giving me a whole time period to do nothing, no work. Yeah, okay. And so like I had pushback from my team when I tried to get it implemented. I'm like, what do you guys, did you try to work straight through? Come on, take a break. They're like, I just didn't believe you.
So, what type of changes have you seen now that you probably do have some sneaky people who are trying to work through their breaks still, but uh are you seeing differences in their output? Are you seeing differences in their attitude? What are you noticing?
Yeah, output definitely. But attitude has been the biggest one. There's a lot more people now who take an actual lunch break and go into the break room and just sit and hang out. And so you also have people who have built stronger bonds with other coworkers because we encourage them to find ways to time their break with somebody else so they can just do whatever they want. One, this was an unexpected benefit, but one of the guys that I dripped this out to and had him test it early on, he emailed me probably about 4 or 5 months after I introduced the rule to him and one of my earlier copies, and he's like, "Hey, I wanted to thank you. I've lost 20 pounds." Like, I don't understand. Like, I owned a gym, but I'm like, you weren't a gym member. I don't understand. How does your weight loss get attributed to me? He said, with the permission to take breaks, he found that he would go 9 to 12, and then that means he gets a whole hour break off. So then from 12 to 1, he's knowing that he had permission based on the science to do nothing at all. He started walking his dog 2 miles a day. And also because he got in some physical activity in the middle of the day, the afternoon crash didn't happen like it does for most people, like the 2 or 3 o'clock lulls. And he found that he didn't need to eat sugary food in the afternoon to keep his energy up. So he ate healthier, all because he had permission now to take a break, which he chose to walk 2 miles with the break. So, um, yeah, I think, anyways, as far as other pushback goes, those were the big ones. It's going to be hard for a small business owner to maybe wrap their mind around the idea that you're giving permission for them to not work the full 8 hours. But, all I ask is like read the book, look at the science, it supports that they will be more productive for you. So your labor cost actually becomes a better team member production multiple than it did before.
Sometimes it's the unconventional wisdom that ends up being exactly what we need to achieve our goals. And I think a rigid, closed-minded perspective is going to stagnate. Innovation means trying something new. It means looking at the data, looking at the science, expanding your perspective, expanding your consciousness, being willing to do something different, to shake things up, to disrupt the status quo. And that is what is a big piece of growth and transformation and innovation. We're not in that old industrial era. Before we started recording, you had mentioned a lot of people don't know the story behind the conventional current 40-hour work week. Perfect time to talk about that. So shed some light on this funny idea that we have, that that's the way that it should be.
Yeah, so industrial age, 1800s, the average worker was doing 80 to 100 hours a week. Is all about keeping the machines running. And in order to do that, there had to be people there to like maintain the machine. So, you know, when you work 80, 100 hours a week and you add in sleep time, there are not very many hours left in the week to do anything. So so then you introduce early 1920s, there's this guy who's trying to sell the motorized carriage. And he was like, huh, no one wants to buy these because they don't have any need to use them. How do I create a need? Because right now these guys they just want to go home and sleep. So Henry Ford decided, you know what? I'm going to give my team 2 days. He created the weekend. I'm going to give them 2 days off. And then I'm also going to cap their days at 8 hours. Uh, Now, all of a sudden, his workers are, they're not completely depleted and they have 2 days off where they have to come back into work. Well, I always wanted to go there. It's a little far. Oh, and if I had a motorized carriage, one of these new automobile things, we could go there and come back and like enjoy a weekend doing something else. So Henry Ford created the 40-hour work week Monday through Friday because he wanted to sell more cars. He was kind of villainized at the time, but uh, because now all of a sudden, do I work 80, 100 hours a week, or do I go try to get a job with the Ford Motor Company? Yeah, I'm going to try to get a job with Henry Ford. So people had to adjust, the competitors had to adjust and do the same thing. And then the government slowly caught on, and there was some stuff, and instead of like forcing people to only work 40 hours, they then decided, hey, if you have people work longer than that, you're forced to pay overtime. Like, so all that kind of happened after this happened. So 40-hour work week, 100 years later, we're still doing the same thing, and it was not created based on anything related to science. He just wanted to sell more cars. And luckily, we've had a lot of science happen in the last 100 years, which supports, this idea of thinking about work from a Monday through Friday 40-hour work week is very antiquated. And I think we just need to start looking at it from a standpoint of work up to 3 hours, take a break, 30% recovery period, and people are going to be more productive. Because you mentioned, people are working remote. I have a section in the book where I talk about that because it's critical that if you're working from home, you have certain boundaries in place, or you start feeling like you're living in your office. Um, so this 3.3 rule gives us those boundaries, and maybe the best structure for your workday is, yeah, I'm going to get some stuff done from 6 a.m. to 9, and I'm not going to be able to get back to work till do work things till like maybe 4 or 5 o'clock. Okay, that's fine. You're still getting 6 hours of work in a day, but based on our own individual needs and what's going on in our personal life, like why would we limit someone to like, no, you got to be here 9 to 5? Like, it doesn't always work.
I think that the concept here that you're teaching, you're preaching, you're educating on is so incredible. I want to really highly encourage everyone. Does not matter. You don't have to be in the accounting business. This is relevant to everyone, really. I mean, obviously, this is more targeted at business owners, but there is an element of truth in this that is applicable to everyone on pretty much every subject, not just work. When you want to be better at anything, you've got to sort of learn the rules of the game, and you've got to understand how the body works, how the mind works, just like you have to understand how business works. So I'm going to personally give you an endorsement, and I haven't read the book yet. Maybe by the time everybody sees this, I will have read the book, and you can hit me up and you can say, Alicia, what did you think of the book? And I will tell you, I'm sure, that it was fucking great. Go out and read it. But I want to encourage people to open heart, open mind, right? Get the book, try it out. Hey, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? Maybe you can do it as a test run and see how it works within your organization. So, any final parting thoughts, John, before we wrap it up for today?
Yeah. So, that what you just said is funny because it's like, well, what do you say to the naysayers? I say, okay, I tell you what, because the book was designed to be very simple to implement, at the minimum, the 3.3 rule. Like anyone could do that tomorrow. You hear the concept once, you could do it tomorrow. So the naysayers, uh, uh, it's like, how would you respond to someone say like, it's not going to work? I say, cool. If you think I'm completely wrong, the only way for you to prove me wrong is to give me evidence. So go ahead and do a day, work up to 3 hours, followed by a 30% recovery period, and then tell me all the ways how you were not more productive. Like, show me how it was terrible for you. Because I'm confident if everyone will actually try this out, they'll realize they get more done and their day was more enjoyable. Because who doesn't love a break time that you can do absolutely nothing? Whatever, I mean, shouldn't say you can do whatever you want. There are certain things that are not great to do on your break. But for the most part, like being able to just relax and not have your mind on work is you're you're gonna you're gonna love it.
Well, this has been great. Very fun conversation. Thank you for taking some time to chat with me about all of this. And again, everybody go out, get the book, read it, implement it, try it out. If it makes you more productive, if it makes you happier, hell, maybe you'll even lose 20 pounds too. So this has been fun. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you.